Oh, dang. Thank you so much, Taylor. Welcome, everyone, to the fifth installment of the Echo Black Voices Power Building Sessions presented by our California Worker Outreach Project. Thank you all for being here. So, tonight we will be covering the topic of discrimination with our co host, High Desert Black Worker Center and the Civil Rights Department. And this Edu-Series is all about educating, outreaching, and engaging with Black workers all across Southern California to teach them and educate them and further invest in Black worker power, Black worker justice, and just the Black worker and Black person experience overall. So throughout this evening, watch out for some links that we'll be dropping off in the chat. We'll be dropping off some resources, so feel free to engage with us that kind of way. And if you have any technical questions, reach out to any one of the hosts. That would be myself, Melissa, Don, whoever you see present on the call, basically. But yeah, we can go on to the next slide. All righty. As y'all know, this is the month of June. I had to acknowledge and talk about Juneteenth, considering it's been a federal holiday for 3 years, y'all, which just shows so much like how much further we have to go. But it is a great milestone. So, as part of this discrimination topic, we're also celebrating Juneteenth. Like I said, it's only been 3 years since it's been a federal holiday. So while we get to celebrate another win, the milestone for Black folk, this further indicates the long fight we have ahead of us for racial equity, equality, justice, and visibility for Black folk in its entirety. So we commemorate these achievements and contributions of Black people and everyone on this call who have fought and who will continue to fight for liberation and freedom throughout our history. We also recognize the work that remains to be done to fulfill our ancestors' promise of equality of all Black folk. So I wanted to root us in that energy. And of course, as always, when we have these Echo Black Voices series, we always have Earth Lodge on the call to just ground us in some work. So before we actually hop into the topic of discrimination, I'm going to just move this energy over to Earth Lodge, and I'm going to let them ground us in some deeper words of wisdom before we jump into the topic today. So without further ado, Cynthia, go ahead and do your thing, girl. Cynthia, I don't know if you're on mute or not.
I was on mute. Ooh, I was just talking up a storm too. Hi, everybody. Now you could hear me. I'm Cynthia Ruffin, Cynthia Thornburg Ruffin. My pronouns are she, her, and a revolutionary angel because the fight is real and we're all in it in some way or another. I am part of the Healers Network and I'm the program director of the Earth Lodge Center for Transformation. And there, it is a wellness center. It's a wellness center located right in urban Long Beach. And we draw all of our wellness practices from Southern Indigenous practices and the Southern Indigenous practices as taught to us by our founder, Queen Hollins. So I don't know, Darren, if you have another slide there for me or not. Probably not, right?
No.
Perfect. Perfect. Good. Okay. So I'm going to lead us in a grounding exercise, right? As we prepare to embark on this conversation about discrimination, especially right now around this time of Juneteenth, right? So we're talking about our pride as a Black people, part of the African diaspora, and at the same time, the shame that continues to be leveled at us in the form of discrimination. And why it's so important that we really go back to some of these Black Southern Indigenous practices. Some, are like meditation and grounding and all these practices that as Black folks, sometimes we don't think belong to us, right? These are the things that empower us to be able to step in and continue with this good fight. So right now, I'd like to invite you all exactly where you're sitting or standing. I'm standing in front of the computer right now because it makes me feel energized for things like this. But if you're sitting, I hope you are. Just sit with both of your feet flat on the ground, right? If you're crossing your legs, uncross your legs, both feet flat on the ground. And both of your hands, sit both of those hands right on your thighs. And take a nice deep breath in. And you can leave your eyes open or closed, whatever makes you comfortable. And breathe out. And breathe in. And breathe out. And continue breathing while getting your own rhythm to breathing, but getting your own rhythm to nice, deep breathing. If you came into this meeting anxious and excited because you do have something that you need to talk about this evening, you've got some information that you really want to get, take this moment to ground yourself with your breathing in and out at your pace. So the focus of our grounding right now is going to be gratitude. Yes, gratitude. We're going to start with our bodies, and you're going to keep breathing in and out. We're starting with gratitude for the fact that we can take these breaths in and out. Gratitude that we can lift both of our hands. If we are able, we can lift one or the other. Gratitude, if we are able, that we can get up out of our chairs and we can walk, that we can dress ourselves and feed ourselves. Gratitude that our inner organs work. And today was a beautiful day, albeit hot. Gratitude that our two eyes can see the blue sky, if that be the condition that your eyes are in. Gratitude for whatever we can hear. Because all too soon, especially those of us who are growing older, our eyes and our ears go. Gratitude for what we have. Gratitude for our meals and the hope that our relatives are also doing well. And now, as we shift out of gratitude for our bodies and what we have the ability to do, it's gratitude for the lessons that we learn in life. Sometimes those lessons are hard won. And we can choose that they're a lesson or choose that they will just be a thorn in our side and a reason to stay in energy that is not generative and energy that doesn't move us forward. And breathe in and breathe out. Keep breathing. Gratitude for the lessons that brought you here onto this call this evening. Breathing in and breathing out. Because without the lesson, then we cannot get to the next place. Without the lesson, we cannot get to the next place. Now, as you continue to breathe, let's not be mistaken. We can say, thank you very much. Now get me what I'm due. That's the next step. Being able to get into a place of gratitude opens us up to see what our opportunities are. And then we can really go for the opportunities, go for getting our due, go for getting the money that's owed to us. And we can do it just by the book and get it done and not have our feelings get into it. It's so easy when something awful has happened to us. Something often awful happened to me and one of my colleagues on the campus of Long Beach City College last week. When stuff like that happens, grounding offers you the opportunity to be able to respond powerfully. So keep breathing in and out and in and out as we get ready to embark on this conversation that will definitely get our feelings all up and riled. But when we stay grounded and keep breathing, when the opportunities and the answers and the solutions are there for us, we will hear them and we can act. Keep breathing. And right where your feet are, wiggle your toes and shake your legs. Pat your thighs with your hands. Pick up your hands and shake your fingers a little bit. Move your shoulders and your face and bring your whole self into this conversation. Bring your whole self, bring your whole heart, and stay grounded. And these are the kinds of techniques that we work on at the Earth Lodge. We work on meditating, sound bowls and sound baths, fires, how to set intention and throw what you don't need into the fire. That is the kind of work we do. And that's the kind of work that comes right out of our Black Southern Indigenous practices.
Indeed.
So that was very short, but I hope it was very helpful. And I am going to go ahead, Dawn, you put that on right on time. I'm going to go ahead and introduce a wonderful Dawn Modkins, who is the executive director of CWOP, of the California, of the Southern California Black Workers Hub. And she is going to lead us through the next session. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you, Cynthia. So important that we be grounded and centered in every way that we move. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Good evening, y'all. Yes, I'm the director of the Southern California Black Worker Hub. We coordinate and support the capacity building for our worker centers all across Southern California. We are getting ready to get into it tonight with our co-host, the newly incubated and formed High Desert Black Worker Center. And with us tonight is representative from Department of Industrial Relations, the Civil Rights Department, who will walk us through understanding discrimination, understanding ways to address violations of our rights having to do with anti-Blackness and discrimination. And so before I pass it to them, I'm just going to take like 2 minutes to mention a couple of things. We're about to learn how to address anti-Blackness and discrimination at work when our rights are being violated by the means of potentially filing a claim, learning how to identify what a claim might be and how to file that and utilize our state agencies to address violations of this right around discrimination. But I want to mention there are other ways to deal with violations in the workplace when we experience them, right? And so what you see on the slide, sure, we can file a claim. We could file a lawsuit. We could do nothing at all. We could deal with it, be stressed out, having to be at the Earth Lodge fire pits every single day, right? We could just leave and be like, I'm done. I'm not handling, I'm just done. So there's so many ways, but the one I want to highlight is organizing. Next slide. There is power in organizing, right? Organizing is how we build power in the workplace. That means talking to each other about the experiences that we're having. Guaranteed, you are not the only one. If you're having, whether it's a discriminatory experience or some kind of where you feel like you're experiencing a violation of some working class right? It's leveraging our collective strength to resolve the issues. Likely, when folks come together to talk about what are some ways we can resolve these challenges, chances are it might be a little bit quicker than waiting for our systemic approaches that we know sometimes can be cumbersome. They're there to work for us. We want to be able to rely on them, and we're about to learn about them more right now with Civil Rights Department, but we know oftentimes it can be tough. And so what can help build power around resolving issues at work is through organizing, empowering each other through whether that's workplace actions, a petition, a delegation, engaging community, raising awareness publicly. Those are just some examples. So if you're ever experiencing something, right, you're here to learn how to take advantage of our state agencies to assist in filing claims. And if you're ever thinking about how do I organize in my workplace, don't hesitate to reach back out to us, to your worker center, or to the hub directly, and we can assist you in that effort. So keeping organizing in mind, let me get us pass this mic to the High Desert, to Miss Phyllis, one of the board members, the advisory board members of the High Desert. We are excited to learn more about them tonight and then get into it with the Civil Rights Department. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. Phyllis, it is all yours.
Well, thank you, Ms. Dawn, and thank you, Darren, for the opportunity to be present. I want to talk a little bit about, or we want to talk a little bit about why we decided to organize behind the Black Worker Center. We are in San Bernardino County. In San Bernardino County, next slide, please. San Bernardino County is the largest county in the contiguous United States. If we can go to the next slide. So we're in the northern portion of the county where approximately 500,000 people live. We have the major cities of Victorville, Barstow, Adelanto, the town of Apple Valley, and Hesperia. And our major route is the I-15 freeway that goes through the mountain ranges of Los Angeles and San Bernardino National Forest down into what we call the valley. And this southern western portion of the county is where the majority of the population lives. However, over 500,000 people live out here in the desert area up here. And so we decided that we needed to bring services into the high desert so that people in our community can thrive. Next slide, please. So throughout the county, you will see many desert communities. It looks like barren land, but believe me, there are people that are actually living out there, okay? There are small communities dotted throughout the desert. Next slide, please. San Bernardino County's history is based in agriculture, transportation, aviation, and mining. And then it has a strong military history. And in fact, in the 60s, when I came to the area, you had a skilled labor force that supported the military operations. You had 3 bases: Fort Irwin Marine Logistics Center and George Air Force Base. But then in 1993 or 1992, George Air Force Base was deactivated. And that really affected the economy up here in the Victor Valley region. The skilled labor force was forced to either commute or to move. And housing, we lost our military population, housing became cheap. And that is where that's when the demographics of the area changed. Before that, the area was predominantly white and highly conservative. You had Blacks involved in the skilled labor force. However, you didn't really see them in the administrative and management positions. Next slide. So why a Black Worker Center? When the area began to recover, it recovered in the areas of retail and hospitality. And those are areas that have low wage jobs. And it was really challenging for families that lived in the high desert, because if you're in a low wage job and you're trying to move on, it was a financial challenge to be able to commute downhill to where the services, the programs, the education was. And so people really struggle, but now we're at the crossroads where there are some economic opportunities, exciting economic opportunities that are coming to us. However, when you look at what's going on and who's working in the high desert, there's a population of people that are missing. And the population that's missing is the Black worker. Next slide, please. So some of the major projects that we have the Brightline West high-speed train. That is the train that will go from Rancho Cucamonga, run through the desert areas into Las Vegas, Nevada. That train is expected to bring about 35,000 jobs, including 10,000 construction jobs, 1,000 permanent jobs, with a $10 billion impact to the economies of Nevada and California. We also have the California High-Speed Rail, which is really a valley project. However, in looking at the future plans for the California High-Speed Rail, that rail will run across the desert and connect the Lancaster-Palmdale area to the Brightline station, which will be in Apple Valley, somewhere in Apple Valley. They will have a passenger station, and they will also have a maintenance yard. And then we have the Barstow International Gateway project, which will result in the largest state-of-the-art rail hub in Northern California. It will be a staging area for goods are coming in to Los Angeles and Long Beach ports, moving eastward into the United States. And then, like the Valley has experienced, we are starting to see a warehouse exposure. So we want to get ahead of these projects, and we want to begin our advocacy for Black workers to be involved in the construction and to be involved in the operations that these projects will require. Next slide. However, the indicators paint a grim picture of what's going on in the high desert. So the Black population in San Bernardino County is 8.02%. However, when you look at the cities such as Adelanto, Barstow, and Victorville, the Black population exceeds the 8.02% rate for the county. The overall poverty rate is a problem in San Bernardino County. And in fact, San Bernardino County lists 2 of the desert city as their 3 cities that struggle the most with poverty. You have Adelanto, you have Victorville, and we're behind the city of San Bernardino. When you look at the Black poverty rate for San Bernardino County, it is elevated over the overall poverty rate. And then the same with the unemployment rate. The unemployment rate for San Bernardino County is 5.1%. And yet when you go out into the desert area, we have elevated rates of unemployment. And again, when you look at the Black, specifically at the Black population, our rates are even higher. Next slide, please. And then we find that in terms of the working population, over 40 to 50% of the workers commute. But not only 45 to 50% of the workers commute, if you're looking at training, if you're looking at education, you're going to have to commute. Now, the Barstow Community College and Victor Valley College are doing a great job in terms of developing their CTE programs, but we need more. We need access to union jobs. And in reference to union jobs, we're doing some advocacy with unions because, again, the construction projects that are supported by unions in the high desert, we're not seeing any Black faces. Next slide. So we had a series of community conversations, and out of that conversation, we developed a strategic plan. And an important component of that strategic plan is the High Desert Black Worker Center. And I'm going to turn it over to Janice at this time.
Thank you so much, Phyllis, and good evening, everyone. I'm Janice Presley. I'm also a member of the advisory board for the High Desert Black Worker Center. Next slide, please. We do have a mission and a vision for the High Desert that's very similar to many of the other Black worker centers across the country, with our focus really being on educating and empowering Black workers and ensuring that they not only have the support and the skills that they need for today, but also into the future. Next slide. The advisory board has been working feverishly for over a year to bring forth our expertise in fundraising, research, community organizing, legal, program management, and people development to the table. We've also been working on building the infrastructure through networking and collaborating with those in our community and across the state to garner support and to ensure that the unique issues affecting Black workers that Phyllis talked about in our community is top of mind for everyone. Next slide, please. Right now, we are in the incubation stage and working in collaboration not only with the National Black Worker Center, as well as other organizations represented on today's call. And particularly in the High Desert, we also have been working with Reimagining Our Communities, which is an organization that Phyllis and a few others in our community actually founded that really focused not only on worker rights, but things like voter education, making sure that our schools are doing what they need to do to empower students. And we're doing a lot of education in our community. The one thing that we do know is that in order for us to be successful, we'll know it's going to take a village. It's going to take everyone that's in the High Desert, anyone that's affiliated with the High Desert or knows someone in the High Desert for us to be to work together and continue to be successful. One of the big projects that we just completed was a survey, and I'm going to turn that over to Kamaya Stewart, who's going to talk in detail about what that survey entailed. Kamaya.
Thank you, Janice. Good evening, everyone. I am Dr. Kamaya Stewart. I'm also a member of the advisory board for the High Desert Black Worker Center. And with the sponsorship of the National Black Worker Center, we surveyed Black residents and workers in the High Desert to get their opinions about working or searching for work. Something to keep in mind while we're going through these findings and insights, that they are related specifically to the High Desert region, but we all will notice that our experiences are common among the overall experiences of Black people within our region, state, and even across the nation. So we did collect responses from 1,038 residents, and our sample represented our retirement community, the current generation of workers, as well as the next generation of workers, which included high school students. Most of the folks in our sample, they did represent, or they did live in some of our major cities, like Victorville, Adelanto, the town of Apple Valley, as well as the cities of Barstow and Hesperia. One major highlight would really goes to thinking about the history that Phyllis just discussed, is that we do see that about 40% of our respondents reported that they were unemployed or underemployed, and underemployed in the sense of them having either contract work or part-time employment, for example. And only 25% of folks reported having full-time employment, which also included military service. And so we're seeing that 49% of respondents reported that they were searching for employment. In fact, an average of one person per household was looking for work. And so we are seeing this unemployment and underemployment crisis, which is, we're seeing that is very consistent with the data that's already out there, but it might be underreported in that data that Phyllis was showing you, because we're seeing that the numbers are likely much more higher. And that our residents are either they don't have a job, or excuse me, most of our residents, or a high percentage of them, either don't have a job or they don't have a good quality job. And as shown by almost half of our sample reporting that they're searching for employment, people are looking for jobs, people are looking for careers. Next slide. We also asked our Black residents about the challenges when searching for work in the high desert. And we're seeing, when we take a look at the top 5 issues that folks are saying, the number 1 is racism and discrimination. Number 2 is low pay and wages. 3 is stereotyping and profiling. 4 is a lack of people of color in higher roles. And then 5 goes back to number 1. It's this fear and anxiety around discrimination. And other issues that we're seeing is a difference in standards. We're seeing that there's educational disadvantages based on the jobs that are being posted. There's a lack of experience and training based on the jobs that are being posted and the jobs that are available. We're seeing transportation issues and a lack of connection or network within some of these positions that are being posted or that are available. And going back to thinking about how the number 1 issue that was reported was racism and discrimination. Well, 70% of our respondents reported experiencing discrimination, stereotyping, prejudice, or bias because of being a Black worker, or because of being someone who's Black and they're looking for work in the high desert. So it's a major, major, major issue overall for Black workers, and really highlighting the experiences of the residents in the high desert. I do want to note some of the main issues that folks were saying they were having when it came to racial discrimination was explicit discrimination based on being Black, seeing that there's double standards or there's favoritism of other races. They're seeing culturally based judgments such as hair discrimination. There's these indirect or subtle remarks or behaviors they're experiencing, and then also baseless assumptions or stereotyping. Next slide. So as we look forward, we did want to ask folks, what are the characteristics of a good quality job? And the top 5 that folks mentioned were benefits such as paid leave, health insurance, and retirement plans. The second was advancement of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in the workplace, which I really want to emphasize as we see this effort happening across the nation by certain groups in order to get rid of DEI efforts. We're still seeing that Black people are holding strong, saying that what makes or one characteristic of a good quality job is having DEI in the workplace. The third thing folks are saying is job security. 4th is hours. And the last thing is equitable and higher pay. So these are some of the top things that make a good quality job. And then going towards thinking about the High Desert Black Worker Center in particular, we ask folks, what do they want in their center? When we are, actually have a location for folks to come to, the things that they are saying are access to technology such as computers, childcare assistance, help searching and applying for jobs, housing assistance, educational development, food assistance, skill development, transportation assistance, and interview clothes. And we're seeing a mix, and I do want to acknowledge that the Earth Lodge Center and also the SoCal Black Worker Hub as a collective have really been pushing that, you know, health and wellness for workers, for Black workers in particular, is so very important. And we're seeing that too when it comes to the services folks are saying that they want from us. There's direct assistance to get really good quality employment, but also a lot of these other things that help us, you know, be a really great worker, which, you know, is more of the childcare assistance, the food assistance, and all these just essential needs. And so us at the High Black Worker Center, we're very excited to continue working with our residents to establish our center and to embark on this journey toward advocacy, unity, and prosperity in the Black High Desert community. We're really passionate about growing Black power and Black wealth in our area, and we know that's going to lead to, you know, with the collective effort of the SoCal Black Worker Hub and all of our Black Worker Centers, lead to you know, prosperity within our region, and then connecting to our state, and then hopefully with all the other local Black Worker Centers, really we're going to have this nationwide impact. I am going to pass this on to Darren. If y'all have any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat, and also you can contact us and we can share more about ourselves. We can share more about our survey, but we definitely wanted to introduce y'all to us, introduce y'all to some of our findings, and we hope to actually publish a report in collaboration with all of y'all.
All right, thank you so much, High Desert. That was really, really good information, really, really insightful. Like, I really learned a lot being someone who's a transplant from Memphis, living in LA. It's so nice to hear about like the different new cities and see where the Black people have dispersed to. Because growing up, you hear about all these centralized area of Black folks, and then you get here, it's not that. So to hear that information for you all to share with us, thank you so much. All right. Taylor, go ahead and transition us over to the next slide so we can get into the breakout groups. So it's time for us to hear from you all and for you all to share a little bit with us about your worker experience. So we have a breakout question here. Real quick. When you go into these breakout groups, y'all, remember the community agreement that we referenced at the top of this meeting. But in the breakout group, you have 3 questions. We want you all to talk about it with each other, share, and then we'll give you all a few minutes to discuss, and then we'll call you out from the breakout groups, and we'll have one person share their story. But yeah, the breakout questions is here. So share a time when you experienced or seen discrimination at work, and we have 3 follow-up questions just to help further and deepen the discussion. So without further ado, we're going to turn it over to our state rep who is co-hosting this evening, who has been recently promoted to Assistant Deputy Director of Outreach and Education from the Civil Rights Department. Rashida, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, we have so much to get to. I'm going to try to get through all of this, but yeah, let's just dive right in. Next slide. Next slide. So what this is I'm just going to provide an overview of fair employment and some of the laws that the Civil Rights Department enforces. It is so much to talk about. It is so much to unpack. So this is really just like a high-level overview designed to give you a little bit of a taste of some of the work that we do. It's not going to be super comprehensive. Certainly, if you're interested in bringing us to your workplace or your organizations to expand on some of these topics, I totally encourage that. But one quick disclaimer, I am a lawyer and we love disclaimers. This guidance is for informational purposes only, does not establish substantive policy or rights, and does not constitute legal advice. Any information that I'm sharing here today is based on the most recent guidance as of today, but it is your responsibility to stay on top of any changes in the law and the guidance. Next slide. So what is the Civil Rights Department? Our mission is to protect the people of California from unlawful discrimination in employment, in housing, and public accommodation, so like public businesses. as well as protect them from hate violence. Shout out to my colleague James from California versus Hate, who's on this call, and also protect them from human trafficking. Next slide. We have many responsibilities. We investigate complaints of discrimination as well as other civil rights violations. We facilitate dispute resolution involving civil rights matters. We prosecute violations in civil court. We issue regulations to provide a little bit more clarity about some of the laws that we enforce. We collect data on the pay and the demographics of certain employers' workforces, and we report that information out on our website. We do what I'm doing right now, which is we do outreach and conduct trainings in order to let Californians know what their rights and responsibilities are under the law. And finally, we work with communities and local and state public bodies to constructively manage and resolve discrimination-based conflict. Next slide. We do provide accessibility services for people with disabilities, including people who want to file a complaint with our department. So if that's something you need to take advantage of or someone you are supporting needs to take advantage of, the contact information is there. Next slide. Oh, thanks for putting it in the chat too. We also provide services in other languages. Many of our resources online are translated, and we also provide bilingual services to people who file a complaint with our department. So again, the information is there and in the chat. Next slide. I'm gonna hide my face so that I'm not distracted by myself. There we go. So jumping right in, I want to talk a little bit about a couple of the laws related to employment that our agency enforces. The first and really the only one we're going to talk about here today is the Fair Employment and Housing Act, aka FEHA. And what that is it is a law that protects employees and job applicants from discrimination and harassment based on protected characteristics. So we're going to unpack all of that shortly. It also prohibits retaliation and requires reasonable accommodations for disabilities and for sincerely held religious beliefs. The Fair Employment and Housing Act applies to state and local government employers as well as private employers that have 5 or more employees. Another law that we enforce in the employment space that I'm not going to speak about, but especially in light of what Dana just shared, it seems worth mentioning. The Equal Pay Act is a law that says that employers cannot pay one employee less than another of the opposite sex or of a different race or ethnicity for doing basically the same work. Next slide. So I mentioned that FEHA prohibits discrimination and harassment based on a protected characteristic. What does that mean? What is a protected characteristic? I have a sort of circular definition for you, but a protected characteristic is going to be a personal trait, belief, or a thing about a person or a group of people that is protected by law from discrimination or harassment. So this is better illustrated through example, right? The law protects people from discrimination based on race. Race is a protected characteristic. If folks feel like sharing, feel free to put in the chat some other protected characteristics that come to mind. And I'll wait patiently for about 20 seconds and then we'll move to the next slide. Ooh, hair, that's a great one, James. Gender, thank you, Kirby. Take maybe one more. But I don't see any, so we can move on. Next slide. So here are all of the employment protected characteristics by law. So gender, as Kirby pointed out, race does include hair texture, it includes hairstyle. So like if you have locks, you know, if you wear your hair natural, whatever it is, that is included under the umbrella of race as a protected characteristic at work. There's also other things like color, ancestry, national origin, religion, age for people who are 40 and over, that's protected in the workplace. And then there's many others, I won't read them all, but sex, gender, sexual orientation, etc. You can see them all here. One thing that's important to note is that this does include someone's actual protected characteristics. So like my actual gender is I identify as a woman, but also someone's perceived protected characteristics. So if my employer is discriminating against me because my employer thinks that I am a Muslim, that is against the law, even if I actually am not a Muslim. That's one example. It also prohibits discrimination based on association with members that have certain protected characteristics. So again, as an example, if like all of my friends at work are Latinx and my employer or my supervisor is harassing me on that basis, that is against the law, even if I am not a member of that group. Next slide. Related to something Dana said in the chat, there are certain rights under FEHA that are sort of related to protected characteristics, but we say that they flow from protected characteristics. They're not quite protected characteristics themselves, but are related. So FEHA protects the right of people to take leave to take care of themselves or a family member if someone is experiencing a serious illness, if they're disabled by pregnancy or some kind of a related medical condition, to bond with a new child, whether through birth, through adoption, surrogacy, etc., after the death of a family member or after experiencing a reproductive loss, like a stillbirth or a miscarriage, a failed adoption, something like that. Next slide. And as Dana pointed out, there are specific protections in FEHA for people who have criminal histories and are looking for employment. So this is the Fair Chance Act. And we're going to dig into the Fair Chance Act a little bit at the end if we have time. Also worth noting too is that starting in 2024, there are certain protections against discrimination based on a person's use of cannabis off the job and away from the workplace, so recreationally. We're not going to get into that today, but we have a fantastic fact sheet on our website on that topic if you're interested in learning more. Next slide. Okay, digging into discrimination, harassment, and retaliation, and what those things mean, how they manifest in the workplace. Let's get into it. Next slide. What is discrimination? I think we all have sort of a sense of what it is, but the sort of high-level legal-ish definition, not a super precise legal definition, but like a functional one, is that discrimination means treating someone differently at work, at least in part, based on a protected characteristic. In order to prove discrimination, the person has to experience some kind of harm at the hands of their employer. So in the next slide, I can talk a little bit about some examples of harm. Some of these harms might be refusing to hire someone, maybe refusing to hire them because they're a woman, firing someone because they don't want to trim their afro, giving someone an undeserved negative evaluation because they associate with a non-binary colleague. These are all just examples of some of the harms a worker or a job applicant might experience related to their protected characteristic, such that it would give them a cause of action in discrimination, for discrimination. Next slide. I know that was rapid fire, but we're going to already move into harassment, just to give you a sense of what that is. And so harassment is unwelcome words or behavior, again, based on a protected characteristic that threatens, intimidates, embarrasses, or demeans someone. It might affect someone's ability to do their job. It might undermine their personal sense of well-being. It can really affect someone. One important thing to note here is that it's actually against the law for employers of any size to harass an employee or a job applicant. So I mentioned before that in general, FEHA applies to public employers and private employers with 5 or more employees, but the prohibition on harassment is an exception to that. It applies to all employers. Next slide. Harassment can be perpetrated by someone's supervisor, by someone's coworker, and even by a third party. So like client, a customer, someone, who comes and patronizes your restaurant, the UPS guy, whatever. It can be a third party. And the reason why these distinctions are important is because they impact whether or not and to what extent an employer is going to be legally responsible. So if a supervisor harasses someone, the employer is automatically legally responsible or liable. If, however, it's a coworker or maybe a third party, then the employer is going to be legally responsible if it knew or should have known about the harassment and it failed to fix it, failed to take some kind of appropriate action to fix it. Next slide. Moving quickly into retaliation. Retaliation is when an employer punishes an employee or treats them unfairly in some way, at least in part because they exercised what we call a protected legal right. And so that is going to look like a number of different things. That could be filing a complaint with our agency or helping someone else file a complaint. It might be cooperating with an investigation into harassment or discrimination, or telling a supervisor, I think, Joan from accounting is being sexually harassed, or, hey, I think this is really unfair. It feels like you're discriminating against me because I'm Black. Those are just some examples. You don't need to use magic words in order to let a supervisor know such that it would be a protected legal right. It's fine to phrase it just as I phrased it. You don't need to use legal terminology or anything in order to be protected. Another example might be organizing around some of these issues. So if an employer punishes someone or treats them unfairly because of that, that may be retaliation under the law. Next slide. All right, let's see how this plays out a little bit in the real world. So this is our friend Joe. Joe is an employee of Robert's Drilling Company and is the only woman on her shift. Every few days, there's some really nasty sexual graffiti that appears in the bathrooms. It actually mentions her by name. And she's very, very disturbed by this, right? It makes her uncomfortable, it makes her feel unwelcome. Her supervisor also runs a monthly team building activity and has stopped inviting Joe, basically reasoning, doesn't seem like you enjoy being around your male coworkers, Joe, so I'm going to go ahead and stop inviting you to this. Joe lets her supervisor know that this does not seem fair and also mentions the graffiti. So against her wishes, the supervisor just reassigns her to the graveyard shift, reasoning maybe you would be happier working for a smaller crew with more women. What do we think? Are there any legal violations? Next slide. I'll tell you the answer. So uninviting Joe from the team building activities is likely discrimination based on sex. The bathroom graffiti is likely sexual harassment. We know that this is unwelcome behavior. It's based on a protected characteristic, sex or gender, and it's really affecting her ability to do her job. Reassigning her to the less desirable shift after she complains may be retaliation based on her exercising a protected legal right. Next slide. What is her recourse here? What can she do? So one thing that Joe can do is she can file a complaint with our department within 3 years of the date of the harm. And there's a number of ways to do that. You can do it online, by mail, or over the phone. If Joe is successful, some possible outcomes might be money. She might get compensated for any out-of-pocket losses she experienced. Yes, document. That's great. Thank you, Melissa. She might get some money for emotional distress even. The company might be required to change its policies. They might be required to have the staff undergo further training to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone ever again. So that's a little bit about our complaint process. Next slide. Alrighty. Shifting gears, let's chat a little bit about reasonable accommodations. Next slide. So I noted this earlier, but California law requires employers to reasonably accommodate employees and job applicants that have disabilities. Under the law, a disability is defined as a mental or physical impairment that limits someone's ability to perform what we call a major life activity. That includes physical, mental, and social activities, particularly the ones that would affect a person's ability to get a job or to move forward in their career. Next slide. Here are just a few examples of major life activities, things like walking, eating, concentrating, communicating, and the operation of bodily functions like the digestive system, for example. Next slide. What a reasonable accommodation is it's some kind of a modification to the workplace that makes it so a person with a disability can really perform the essential functions of their job and enjoy the same benefits and privileges of work as their colleagues that don't have disabilities. Next slide. I mentioned an essential function, and just to give you a sense of what that means, a job duty might be what we call essential under the law for a number of reasons, including the job might exist basically just to perform that function. So like a receptionist, central to that person's job is answering phones. Answering phones and communicating might be an essential function. Maybe there are only a few employees who are able to perform that function, like only certain people are forklift certified, so operating a forklift is an essential function of that role. Or maybe an employee is hired because they have some kind of a special expertise in this particular area that enables them to do some kind of a specialized function. So maybe it's like the position requires fluency in Mandarin, so communicating in Mandarin and hearing, and speaking in that language might be an essential function. Next slide. Here are just a few examples of reasonable accommodations. It might be something like making a physical modification to the workplace. So like installing a ramp, for example, something like that. Providing some kind of equipment or technology for someone like a screen magnifier, changing a work vehicle so that there are lifts and hoists on it, if that's helpful to someone. Assistance animals, telework. There's a number of different ways that reasonable accommodations can manifest in the workplace. Really, the sky's the limit, and it requires a lot of very tailored, individualized discussion in order to find a good solution. Next slide. If someone needs to request a reasonable accommodation, it's really best to let someone know who has authority at your workplace. So that might be your supervisor or manager, maybe it's HR. And again, there's no requirement that someone uses magic words. You don't even have to use the words reasonable accommodation. You could say something like, I have a disability that's making this aspect of my job really challenging. Can we talk through some potential solutions? Something like that. It doesn't have to be in writing, but as a lawyer, I will say that it's very helpful to have a paper trail and to document. And you can request it at any time. You can request it before a job interview. You can request a reasonable accommodation after the interview when you've been hired, before you start work. You can also request it 5 years into working a job. So it's really very flexible. The important thing here is that the request is going to start what is called the interactive process. Next slide. The interactive process is, it's really like a brainstorm. It's an exchange of information between the employer and the employee or job applicant about their need for reasonable accommodation and what might be possible in a given situation. So it might include kind of going back and forth, learning more about the person's needs and their limitations, what's challenging for them. It might include some very limited requests for medical documentation, not like someone's full file, but very, very limited. And importantly, it's ongoing, right? So if an accommodation turns out not to be useful or effective, that's not just like the end of the discussion. You have to revisit it to find a workable solution. Next slide. An employer is not obligated to grant every single reasonable accommodation a person requests. And in fact, legally, they don't have to grant any request if doing so would pose an undue hardship. The law defines this as a significant difficulty or expense when you consider that specific employer's resources. So for example, a big company like Amazon, if someone requests a ramp to be built in a facility, they're a large multinational corporation. They might be able to handle that no problem. But if it's like a very, very small mom and pop shop with 5 employees that, has very limited resources, that might be an undue hardship for that individual employer. They also don't have to grant a request for a reasonable accommodation if it would endanger the health or safety of the person or of other people. So this is something that came up in COVID a little bit. People wanted an accommodation not to wear a mask, and some employers were using this law to say that it's not reasonable because it's going to endanger your health or other people's health. Next slide. Here's another list of things an employer is not obligated to do. They don't have to provide equipment or stuff for someone's personal use outside of work, like a wheelchair that they use, 24/7. They don't have to change an employee's supervisor or create a new position, though they can transfer them to a vacant position, eliminating an essential function. A lot of this stuff I think is pretty intuitive, but an employer is not obligated to do these things. Next slide. Okay, really quick, we're going to do a quick typo and then see if we have a little time to talk about the Fair Chance Act. So this is our buddy Bernie. He works for a shipping company where he unloads heavy boxes from delivery trucks into the warehouse. After he unloads each truck, he records the number of boxes in an inventory sheet. He one day gets a really bad back injury and it limits his ability to lift more than 10 pounds. He asks his supervisor if he could just change his job so that he's no longer doing the box unloading and only doing the filling of the inventory sheets. Next slide. The first question is, does he have a disability? Yes, the answer is he does have a disability, even though his injury is temporary and eventually he will likely heal and be able to lift again. He does have a physical impairment that limits this major life activity of lifting. Really, the million-dollar question is, does his employer have an obligation to grant the specific accommodation that Bernie requested? The answer is no. What Bernie is requesting would eliminate an essential function of his role, which is to lift these boxes and move them from the truck. The employer should explore some other possibilities, though, during the interactive process. So some possibilities might be maybe providing him with lifting equipment, reassigning him to a vacant position that doesn't require lifting. So there's options here. Okay. I know it's a lot of information. We're going to move into the Fair Chance Act. How am I doing on time? It looks to me like I have a little bit of time.
Yeah, we have approximately 10 minutes left, and then yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's just dive right in. Next slide. So what is the Fair Chance Act? The Fair Chance Act is actually my area of expertise. I practiced in this area for a really, really long time, and it is a law that is designed to reduce barriers to employment for people that have conviction history. So they have criminal records, right? Like everything else in FEHA, it applies to public employers and private employers with 5 or more employees. And it applies to job applicants and to existing employees. So if someone has been working at their company for several years and suddenly there's new management and the new manager wants to run background checks on all existing staff, the Fair Chance Act would apply and the employer would have to follow the process I'm about to describe. Next slide. Ooh, I got some cool music. Love it. There are some employers that are not subject to the Fair Chance Act, including some that you might expect, like law enforcement, police departments, parole, probation, district attorneys. They are not subject to the law. Farm labor contractors are not subject to the law. Certain positions at healthcare facilities and jobs working with sensitive populations like children or elderly people are not usually subject to the law. There's this sort of like catch-all provision, this catch-all exception for any position where an employer is required by law to conduct background checks or otherwise restrict employment based on someone's criminal history. And so one example of that is I once had a case where someone wanted to work for PG&E and PG&E would not let them because they had a conviction history. And so I was, fighting with PG&E on that, and it turns out that there is actually a law in the Public Utilities Code that says that PG&E and like, you know, these kinds of public utilities actually are somewhat restricted in terms of, you know, who they can hire. So that's one example of an employer that falls under the exception. Next slide. Really, the crux of what it does is the Fair Chance Act makes it so that employers can't ask about or consider someone's criminal record before it extends a conditional offer. That means during like the job post, you know, on Craigslist, for example, they can't be saying, you know, felons or people with a criminal record should not apply. On the job application, you should not be having questions like, do you have a conviction history? Have you ever been arrested? Things like that. During the interview as well, an employer should never be asking questions about someone's record. You know, tell me, we're going to run a background check. Is there anything you want to disclose to us? Stuff like that. It is only after the conditional offer, next slide, that an employer can ask if the person has a record and can run a background check. But note that some information is always going to be off limits. This includes arrests that did not lead to a conviction. So like if someone has an old arrest on their record, not if they were arrested over the weekend, that's a little bit different. But old arrests where the disposition is that it was dismissed can never be considered. Similarly, any conviction for which someone pursued record cleaning remedies like expungements, certificates of rehabilitation, that kind of thing. There's other things too, like juvenile records, but these are the ones that I typically see come up the most. Next slide. There are certain rules as well under the Fair Chance Act that I think it's really important to be aware of. So under this law, even after, you know, let's say an employer does good, they don't ask or consider a person's record until after extending a conditional offer. At that stage, an employer can't just take back someone's job offer because they have a record, right? They can't categorically refuse to hire all people who have convictions, just saying like, no, we never hire anyone that has any kind of a criminal history or criminal past. And one that I saw all the time in practice is they can't just refuse to hire all people convicted of certain kinds of crimes. So I would typically hear employers say things like, oh no, like we totally encourage people with conviction histories to apply, but we just have a policy where we won't hire anyone with a violent offense, or we won't hire anyone with a sex offense. That is against the law. They cannot just categorically refuse that. Instead, they have to conduct what is called an individualized assessment, which really considers, is there a relationship between the job and the person's history? Like, are those things negatively related to one another? And also, how old is this conviction? So those are really like the things they have to grapple with. Next slide. This is our friend Emmanuel. He received a conditional offer for a job packing boxes at a warehouse. He has a 6-year-old misdemeanor conviction for child endangerment. Do we think there's a direct relationship here between the job and the conviction, such that this company would be justified in telling him they won't hire him? On these facts, there's likely no direct relationship, assuming, of course, there are no children allowed on site. I'm not aware of any warehouse that allows children on site, so I would say there's likely no relationship here. And it's worth noting that it's a pretty old conviction at this point. It's 6 years old. So many, many things can change over 6 years. Next slide. If, for example, in Emmanuel's situation, the employer does want to take back the job offer based on his record, there are certain things it has to do. It has to notify the person in writing of the decision not to move forward, again, in writing. They also have to provide a copy of the background check or whatever information they pulled from that has someone's criminal history. Crucially, they also have to give the person the opportunity to respond with more evidence. It might be evidence showing that they've been in treatment for substance abuse disorder for 5 years. You know, Maybe they have gone to community college and are getting straight A's, or, you know, they're transferring to a four-year university and they're like stoked and doing great. You know, whatever it is, it could be letters from old employers, from friends, from caseworkers, from church leaders and community organizations. Whatever it is, the person has the right to submit that information to an employer so that an employer can really make like a well-rounded decision about whether they're an appropriate hire or not. And the last thing is that they have to notify the person of their right to file a complaint with our department if that person feels like the Fair Chance Act was violated in some way. Next slide. Just in passing, I wanted to mention a couple things. We recently filed a big lawsuit against the grocery store Ralph's over alleged violations of the Fair Chance Act. You can see the press release on our website. Next slide. And what we're alleging is that there was a lot of candidates who lost their jobs because they had convictions that really weren't related to the job of working in a grocery store. So like someone had a single misdemeanor count of excessive noise, or had a simple cannabis conviction from like a while ago. Those sorts of things really have no relationship to like bagging groceries or working as a cashier, whatever it is. And we're alleging they failed to perform an individualized assessment and asked an unlawful question about conviction history on their job application. Next slide.
Rashida, before we go to the next slide,
Yeah.
first of all, this is deep and rich. And
Yeah.
I'm like, so many of the men in my family are still incarcerated over such baloney.
Yes.
And so this is critical and important information. Like so many of us know people, have loved ones that are impacted by this information. So
Yes.
one, just thank you. And two, I'm assuming these are shareable. And so if folks want to have this information and be able to go through the rest of these, we can do that?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Please share out my slides. There's a lot of like cool links and stuff in there. So I encourage you all to do that.
Awesome. So we can share this out tonight, y'all. This video will be shared. I was looking at the time. We have 1 minute to close and want to honor folks'
Okay,
time
absolutely.
and the closer time. So thank you so much. I want to pass it to Darren. I know usually we leave some time for some questions for you, Rashida. So you know, Darren, however, you may want to close and then offer for folks to stay if they like for a few questions for you. So, but much gratitude, and I'm passing this to Darren.
Thank you.
No, for sure. No, the information is really, really great. I think what we can do, we can go ahead and just go, Taylor, if we can go to the end so we can share like the resource links. Melissa, go ahead and get ready to drop some of those. Go back because we definitely want to share the Black Worker Survey because like we still got a few days left on that. You can start right there. So as always, everyone, join us for our next Echo Black Voices Power Building session that will be happening next month on July 24th. We will have Inland Empire actually as the co-host, and I think we're going to ask for the Civil Rights Department to come back. So Rashida will actually probably be on the next call too. Yes. And so also, in addition to that, if you feel inclined and compelled after sharing some of your stories today in the breakout groups and here in the open with us, we do have the docu-series that we're still filming. So there is a link there and a link in the chat. So feel free to like click on that link and share information, and we can reach out to you to schedule some time to talk to you. And then we have the Echo Black Voices survey, y'all. That is dropping in the chat. Please drop that in the chat. Click on that. It's approximately around 10 minutes. I think if you like are moving real gracefully, I don't want to say slow, to complete, but if you go through the questions real quick, it'll be like less probably than 5 to 7 minutes to complete. Definitely take some time to do that. Please do that. And of course, save the date for our Black August event. If you're on our mailing list, you probably already got the flyer. If not, you will be getting an updated flyer with the time, the location. Yes, save the date, Black August, so we can see all of y'all in person. We've been doing a lot of stuff virtually, but it's time for us to come together, family reunion style, and party, share some love, share some community, And yeah, just have a good time. But like Don said, Rashida said she would stay on the call for around about like 10, 15 minutes. I don't want to lie on your time, Rashida, to answer any of those questions you probably had about the Civil Rights Department section of this presentation. But yeah, you can go ahead and go to the end, Taylor. And of course, as always, thank you all for coming out. We do want to give your time back. We do want to highlight our regional partners, everybody who's on the call. Thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, those are all our partners right there. Yeah. But thank you all. And of course, if you want to ask Rashida any questions, stay on the call and she'll be here to answer all your questions. But again, thank you all so much.